Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Aaron Hemingway, and welcome to the world of Hemingway Special Ed. So in today's video, I want to talk about 5 tips that you can use when it comes to managing behaviors in your classroom. And this comes as a request from one of my followers on Facebook. And so I hope that this video is useful to everybody in being able to manage challenging behaviors in your classroom. Tip number 1, do not take the behavior personal. I know that is so much easier said than done, but it's important to remember that when working with students with disabilities, oftentimes their behavior is a result of their disability. And trust me, I've seen it all. I've had things thrown at me, I've had students cuss me out, and just, everything in between. And yeah, it's hard to not take stuff like that personal. But when it comes down to it, you have to remind yourself that these students are in your classroom for a reason. And you are there to help them despite, no matter what happens in your classroom. Like I said, for me, getting things thrown at me or being cussed out, you're there to help the student. And, as I said before, their behavior is a result of their disability a lot of times. And so a lot of times, not to not hold them accountable, but at the same time, a lot of times they don't even realize what they're doing until, maybe after the fact. And so you're there to help teach them not only academic subjects, but also to help them, teach them social skills and teach them strategies to help them manage their behavior and prevent further outbursts such as, what I named with cursing or throwing things or whatever it may be. And with that also, it's important to not hold a grudge against your student because that just affects your overall performance when you come to work. So, you come in and you're angry with the student, you're annoyed, you're frustrated, and all those things affect your mood, affect the way that you work with your students. And, because, Johnny over here, you have this beef against him, it's affecting not only Johnny, but it's affecting, Susie, Joe, and Billy over here too. So it's not fair for your other students to receive, the backlash of negative feelings that you have towards the student. So please, remember why you're doing what you're doing. Remember that you're there to help the students and don't hold a grudge. Do not take it personal. Tip number 2, if you're in a position in your classroom to where you're just beyond frustrated, you're beyond angry, and you need a break, it is okay. Humble yourself. Be humbled and ask for help. Tag out if you have to, tell one of your aides, or maybe if you have a co-teacher, tell them, hey, I cannot deal with this right now. I'm having a really hard time. I'm struggling. I really need to take a break. Can you help me? There's absolutely no shame in asking for help, and there's no shame in tagging out and, taking a deep breath or doing, whatever strategies that you have developed for yourself to be able to help yourself calm down and just be able to refocus, to get back into that classroom and to be there for your students, especially the student or students that are demonstrating challenging behaviors. Tip number 3, do not escalate the behavior. And again, this is one of those things where it is so much easier said than done, but in the end, don't get into a power struggle with your student. Don't try to have the last word, because in the end, what's it going to accomplish? You get to say, ha-ha, I win. And what good does that really do you other than maybe momentary self-satisfaction? And what good, more importantly, does it do to your student by trying to get the last word in? Ultimately, what you're going to do is, if you do get into a power struggle like that, your student's behavior is just going to continue to escalate until they're in a position to where they're in a full crisis mode. And, if it's a student that is aggressive, they will get aggressive. It's like an Incredible Hulk situation. Or if they're a student who are just super emotional, it's going to take a long time to get them to, to bring them back down to their baseline level. And so it's important to remember to not get into a power struggle with your student and to not escalate the behavior. Tip number 4, be consistent. So when working with students with challenging behavior, you have to be consistent. So that can come about in many different forms. If you're one of those people who are absent a lot, get ready to, to the best of your ability, not be absent that much, or try to encourage your aides to not be absent as much either. And so that's just one way that being consistent can manifest itself. But then also it's important, especially when you are working with students with challenging behavior, that you have some sort of system in place to be able to help them to be successful and to not go into that full crisis mode that I was describing in the previous tip. And so with that, if you're implementing some sort of behavior reward system or some sort of token economy system, it's so I cannot stress enough, so important to be consistent with it. And you have to have everybody that works in your classroom on board as well. It cannot just be you, because not only will the plan not work, but you yourself will just get exhausted, and it's just leading up to ultimate failure there. And so you have to make sure that you train your aides and other staff in your classroom. You train them well, you take the time, and you show them how you want this plan implemented with fidelity with your student or students. So be consistent, and I promise you, it stinks now, but the problem behavior, it will get better. Tip number 5, and probably the most important tip, is on the weekends or after you get off, self-care, my friends. So whatever this means for you, within reason, don't, go blow $10,000 on a credit card, but, if it means, whatever relaxation means to you, whether it be watching your favorite show, engaging in a hobby that you have, my personal favorite, spending time with my spouse, my lovely wife Carissa, and our 2 beautiful kids, Isley and River, and just doing whatever it is that we do, you have to take care of yourself. If at all possible, do not work on the weekends. I cannot stress that enough. And I realize that a lot of times that isn't possible. You're too far behind, or you want to be able to get caught up on stuff because, obviously you have been dealing with a challenging behavior all week. But I do strongly encourage you to take care of yourself on the weekends and to just do whatever you can to relax and do your best to not think about work. So, that being said, those are my 5 tips that I have for you for working with students with challenging behavior, and more so, taking care of yourself as well as the teacher of the classroom. So, before we go, I have 2 bonus tips for you, and they more so deal with they're just some strategies when working with students with challenging behavior. So number 1 is to teach the student the behavior that you want them to display versus the behavior that they are currently displaying that you don't like. I recommend a social story. And so right here I have a social story from Melissa Finch that I bought off of Teachers Pay Teachers. So I do not own this, just to make that clear. And it's just a social story about personal space. I'm just going to read the first paragraph as an example. It is important to respect my friends and teachers' personal space in all activities when I am at school. And then it goes on to explain, when I'm at school, I do this, I do this, I do this. And that's another thing too, it's important to state what you want the student to do versus what you don't want them to do. Because it's important to put everything into a positive light, and honestly, it just avoids confusion and ambiguity when you say what you want them to do. State it clearly and just make it super obvious for the student and for your staff as well. And then also, if you have tips that I did not mention in this video, please leave them in the comments down below as well. I hope that you guys will engage and, give your suggestions and your feedback. And other than that, I thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.